If you've ever worked a night shift, you know there's a certain kind of quiet that only exists after midnight. The hum of fluorescent lights, the echo of empty hallways, the feeling that something or someone might still be awake when the world isn't. The people who work those hours, janitors, security guards, gas station clerks, they see things the rest of us never will. And sometimes they wish they hadn't. Tonight, I'll be sharing 4 true stories from people who worked the graveyard shift, each one claiming they experienced something they can't explain. These are 4 scary, true horror stories that actually happened on the graveyard shift. I used to work the night shift at a small hospital in northern Pennsylvania. Not one of those big, fancy ones, just a sleepy little community place that handled emergencies, births, and the occasional surgery. I took the job as a janitor because the pay was steady and the building was quiet. I liked quiet. The thing about night shifts, though, is that silence can turn against you real fast. The hospital was built in the 1950s, and it showed its age. The floors creaked like they had bones of their own, and every hallway hummed with that fluorescent buzz that never really stops. Around 2 a.m., it always felt like time itself stopped ticking. My usual routine was simple: mop the ER hallways, clean the break rooms, empty the trash in the surgical wing, and finish up in the basement. The basement was where the storage rooms were, and the old autopsy lab. That part had been closed for years after the hospital got a new wing. Nobody really went down there but me. The lights flickered sometimes, and the smell, that mix of antiseptic and damp concrete, never went away. One night in November, I was finishing up near the supply closet when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of wheels rolling down the hall, like a gurney. I froze. No one else was supposed to be down there. I knew that for sure because I had the only active key card that opened the basement access door. The sound came again. Clack, clack, squeak, steady, slow, heading toward the old autopsy wing. I told myself it had to be one of the nurses moving something upstairs, and the sound was just echoing through the vents. But the hospital was dead quiet, not even the usual footsteps above. I grabbed my flashlight. I didn't really want to, but I had to make sure no one was down there messing around. As I turned the corner, I noticed something odd. The elevator doors at the end of the hall were open. That elevator had been broken for at least 5 years. I remember because I used to prop my mop bucket against it. The light inside flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the tiled floor. I stepped closer, and the temperature dropped so sharply that my breath came out in a white mist. The smell changed too. Something metallic, faintly sweet. I called out, "Hello? Anybody down here?" Silence. Then a muffled sound, like fabric brushing metal, came from inside the elevator car. I shone the flashlight in, and for a split second, I saw a shape under one of the old white sheets they used to cover the stretchers. It looked like someone lying there. My hand shook. "Hey," I said again, my voice cracking. "You can't be down here." The sheet moved, just a little. I took one step back, then another, and that's when I heard the elevator ding. The doors started to close on their own, slowly. The flashlight flickered, and right before the metal doors shut, the figure under the sheet sat up. I dropped everything and ran. I didn't stop until I was back on the main floor, leaning against the vending machine, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. When I finally told my supervisor the next day, she just gave me this look, like she'd heard it before. "That old elevator," she said. "We had a body go missing once, back in the 80s. Never found out what happened. I quit 2 weeks later, but sometimes when I drive by that hospital at night, I swear I can still see the basement lights flicker on and hear that faint, steady squeak of wheels moving in the dark." This one happened a few years ago when I was working nights at a gas station off I-81, exit 17, just outside a town called Westfield. The place was open 24 hours, but after midnight, I was usually the only one there. Nights were slow. I'd sweep, restock the chips, maybe make a pot of coffee that no one ever drank. The hum of the refrigerators was constant, kind of comforting actually. I'd gotten used to it. But that night, something felt off. Around 2:30 a.m., I noticed movement on the security monitor above the counter. We had 4 cameras, one on the pumps, one by the dumpsters, one in the back hall, and one facing the road. On the pump camera, I saw a man standing by pump 3. He was wearing a long, dark raincoat, even though it hadn't rained in weeks. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. He wasn't moving, just standing there, hands at his sides, facing the store. I thought maybe his card wasn't working, so I stepped around the counter and pushed open the door. The air outside was cool and dry. Nobody was there. I walked out a few steps, looked around the pumps. Nothing. The place was dead quiet except for the hum of the lights. I went back inside, kind of laughing to myself, thinking maybe I'd just caught an old recording on the camera feed. But when I looked up at the monitor again, the man was still there. Same spot, same raincoat. Only this time, his head was turned toward the camera. I watched, frozen. The image flickered for a second, then cleared. He hadn't moved, but I could swear he was closer to the lens. I stepped back from the screen and checked the window. The pumps were empty. I unplugged the monitor and plugged it back in, trying to reset the feed. When it came back on, the man was gone. I should have gone home right then, but I stayed. Because that's what we do. We tell ourselves we're being paranoid, that we've watched too many scary movies. Around 4 a.m., I went out back to take the trash to the dumpster. The air smelled like rain, though the sky was perfectly clear. I rolled the bin out, flipped the lid open, and froze. Inside, on top of the trash, was an old newspaper, folded perfectly in half. The date on it was October 12th, 1989. That's strange enough, but the front page story was what got me. Local man found dead at exit 17 gas station. The black and white photo underneath showed a man in a long raincoat, face partly hidden under a hat. I dropped the lid and stumbled backward. The security light above me flickered. Then, from somewhere near the pumps, I heard it. The sound of a car door closing. I turned. A black sedan sat there, engine running, headlights off. I could see the outline of a man in the driver's seat, motionless. I called out, "Hey, you can't park there." No response. I stepped closer, and the car's engine went silent. The interior light flicked on for just a split second, and in that dim yellow glow, I saw the same man from the newspaper photo, sitting in the driver's seat, head tilted slightly, staring straight ahead. When I blinked, the light went out. The car was empty. The next morning, the manager asked why I'd left the back door open all night. I told him about the cameras, the man, the newspaper. He stared at me for a long time and said, "Son, that station burned down in '89. The one you're standing in was rebuilt over it. I quit the following week, and every time I drive past exit 17 on a rainy night, I swear I see the shimmer of a coat at pump 3, just waiting."
Back in 2015, I got a temporary job as a night groundskeeper at St. Mary's Cemetery. It wasn't glamorous work, mostly trimming grass, patching stone, and making sure no one came in after hours. The cemetery sat right behind a small Catholic church, way out past the edge of town, surrounded by woods on 3 sides. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ran until sunrise. Most nights it was peaceful. I'd park the old golf cart by the caretaker's shed, grab my thermos, and just make slow patrols along the paths. The place was quiet in that heavy, suffocating kind of way, like the air itself didn't want to move. I never believed in ghosts, not really. I'd seen enough weird things in small towns to know that people like to talk. But I'll tell you what happened one night, and you can decide for yourself. It started when I noticed the flowers. There was this old grave near the far north corner. Headstone worn smooth, name half faded. Nobody had visited it in years. Then one morning, I saw a fresh bouquet of lilies sitting right on top. I figured maybe a relative stopped by, but the next night, it happened again. Different flowers. It didn't make sense. The cemetery gates locked at sunset, and I was the only one with the key. A few nights later, I made up my mind to catch whoever was sneaking in. Around midnight, I parked the cart near the chapel, turned off the lights, and waited. The moon was bright, silvering the tops of the headstones. The crickets were loud. I remember thinking how alive that place could sound for somewhere full of the dead. Around 1 a.m., I saw it, a glow out by the north fence. At first, I thought it was a flashlight, but it wasn't white. It was this pale bluish light, almost like it came from underwater. It hovered low over the ground, weaving between graves. I grabbed my flashlight and started toward it. My boots crunched on gravel, echoing louder than I wanted. As I got closer, the glow dimmed, like it knew I was coming. When I reached the corner, the light was gone, but the air was freezing. I could see my breath, and there on that same forgotten grave were fresh lilies again, dew still on the petals. I shined my flashlight around. Nothing. Then I heard movement behind me, a slow, dragging shuffle in the grass. I spun around. My light caught something, a figure, crouched low between the headstones, wearing what looked like a torn black veil. The fabric fluttered even though the air was still. "Hey!" I yelled. The figure turned toward me, and I swear to God it didn't have a face. Just a hollow blur where one should have been, like the light itself refused to touch it. I stumbled backward and dropped the flashlight. The bulb cracked, plunging everything into darkness. Then, in the distance, I heard the old chapel bell ring. Once, just one deep metallic tone that rolled across the whole cemetery. I ran, didn't even look back. I got to the caretaker's shed, slammed the door, and locked it. When the sun came up, I went back to the grave. The flowers were still there, but now the name on the headstone was clear, as if it had been freshly carved overnight. It read, Margaret Ellen Moore, 1879 to 1904. I checked the records later that day. Margaret Moore was buried there after dying in a fire at St. Mary's Orphanage, the same one that used to stand where the chapel is now. And here's the part that still gets me. The caretaker before me, the guy who had my job for 30 years. His name was Michael Moore, her son. He passed away the week before I got hired. I only worked there another month. But sometimes when I can't sleep, I still smell lilies. And I hear that bell, ringing once, just once, somewhere out in the dark. A few years back, I worked security at an old textile factory on the edge of town. The company that owned it was turning the place into loft apartments, but the construction had stalled for months. That meant I was basically babysitting an empty building 6 nights a week, 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning, all by myself. The factory was huge. Was 3 stories, half of it gutted, half still full of rusting machines. The air always smelled like oil and dust, and the floorboards groaned when the wind hit the walls just right. They gave me a tiny office near the loading dock, with a desk, a chair, a stack of old security monitors, and a thermos that never kept the coffee warm. Most nights were dead quiet. I'd walk the perimeter every hour, check the cameras, write down that nothing happened. Easy money. But one night around 1:30 a.m., something did happen. I was sitting at the desk watching the monitors when I noticed a faint flicker on camera 12, which covered the second-floor machine room. That camera shouldn't have been working. Power had been cut to that section weeks ago. The feed was grainy, static-filled, but I could make out movement, someone walking between the old spinning machines. I leaned closer. Was tall. The figure was tall, wearing what looked like a work jacket, and they were carrying something that gave off a small light, a lantern, maybe. I picked up the radio and called it in, but nobody answered. Not that it mattered, I was the only guard scheduled that night. I checked the main door, locked. No alarms tripped. I switched to camera 13, the stairwell leading to the machine room, the light there flicked on by itself. I could see faint footprints in the dust on the stairs, fresh ones. I grabbed my flashlight and started up, telling myself it was just one of the construction guys sneaking in for tools or scrap metal. The second floor was colder than it should have been. The air felt heavy, like walking through fog you couldn't see. My flashlight beam caught the old machine's big iron looms with belts and pulleys that hadn't moved in decades. Then I heard it. A soft clicking sound, rhythmic, steady like gears turning. I followed the noise down the main aisle. It was coming from one of the looms in the center of the room. Planes. When I got closer, I realized the gears really were moving. The wheel was turning slowly, pulling a torn thread across the rusted spool. There was no power to that machine. I backed away. The clicking stopped. Then, from somewhere deeper in the room, I heard a man whisper, "Keep it running." My light swung toward the voice, but there was no one there, only the faint glimmer of that same lantern I'd seen on the monitor. It was sitting on the floor beside a pile of rags. The rags moved. I reached down and pulled them back. Underneath was an old work badge, cracked and faded, the name barely visible, Thomas Avery. I'd read that name before. In the orientation packet, there was a section about the factory's history. Back in 1979, a worker named Thomas Avery died in a machine accident pulled in by the gears. They said he'd been doing overtime on the graveyard shift. The factory closed a week later. As I stood there, holding that badge, every machine in the room shuddered at once, belts jerking, gears grinding, that awful clicking echoing in every direction. I dropped the badge and ran for the stairs. When I looked back, I saw a man standing by the window, tall, broad-shouldered, face lit from below by the glow of a lantern. He raised one hand, not waving, turning the wheel of the loom beside him. I made it to the office and locked the door. The monitors flickered. Every single camera now showed the same thing. Thomas Avery, in every room at once, walking slowly toward the lens. The screens went black. The next morning, the foreman found the power room flooded. The wiring had melted, literally melted, as if it had been running full power for hours. They tore the building down a month later. But the weird part was, during demolition, they found an old lantern and a set of bones wedged inside one of the machines on the second floor. No one said anything official, of course, but I still dream about those monitors lighting up one by one. And that whisper, echoing over the hum of the looms, "Keep it running."